All gospel translations are not created equal. Next, on OneGospel. Okay, questions to keep in mind as we go through a quantitative analysis of the Gospel of Matthew and how that relates to other English translations. So, does it matter which Bible translation you use? Just keep that in mind. I think most people would say yes, but they don't necessarily, beyond saying yes, they wouldn't know. What do the translations of the Bible tell us about the translators themselves? So when we go through this analysis, we're going to learn insight into how they actually view the Bible. Do churches or congregations that claim to believe in the inerrancy of the Bible, they don't think it has errors, do they use translations whose translators don't believe that? This is going to be, shall we say, a controversial episode of OneGospel. What do you think, Holly?
I agree.
Okay, let's do it.
Bring it home.
Okay, so let's start with translations. And, I'm not a professional translator. What do I know, right? But these are things I think everyone would agree with. English translations are translated from Greek sources for the book of Matthew. Some differences will come from honest differences of opinion in translating the same Greek word. If you have a Greek word that can mean A or B, depending on the context, the translator may decide to translate it as A or translate it as B, both, even though there may be one that's kind of better, you can at least say the differences would be honest differences. But if they use different Greek sources, where the sentences in Greek are different, or the words are different, well then that will clearly lead to more significant differences in the English translations. Now out there's published multiple Greek New Testaments, and they're not the same. They're not identical. If they were identical, there would only be one because it would either be in the public domain or it would have been copyrighted and no one else could print the same thing. So there are differences in Greek New Testaments. And so differences between these Greek New Testaments arise because the editors that create their Greek New Testaments use different ancient Greek sources. That kind of makes sense, right? So if we can understand the differences in these ancient Greek sources, that can explain many of the differences found in modern English translations. And that's what we're going to do. So there's 4 major ancient Greek sources. One is called collectively the majority text, and it represents the vast majority of the existing manuscripts that existed. They came, we believe, from Constantinople or Byzantium, and it was the base of what became a Greek edition that was translated in by Erasmus called Textus Receptus. He claimed this was the received text, the straight from the hand of God. And it was that Greek edition that the Protestant reformers like Luther and Knox and Calvin used. There are 3 nearly complete New Testaments that are from the 4th and 5th centuries, which are older than the majority text. That doesn't mean that the majority text doesn't have an origin that predates these codices, but these are manuscripts that were found like two of them were found in the desert where, paper doesn't break down, so it was around longer. So, what are they? One is Codex Sinaiticus, 4th century, not discovered till the 19th century. Codex Vaticanus, again, mid-4th century, in the Vatican Library since the 15th century, but not published until the 19th century. Codex Alexandrinus, also middle of the 5th century, and it was published in the 17th century. And so you see here, most of these, it wasn't even possible to compare them in the public domain until the 19th century. That's when textual criticism of the Bible really began to be a scholarly pursuit. So, Konstantin Tischendorf, he wrote a book. You can get it for free. Go to Google Books. That's where I got mine. He discovered the Codex Sinaiticus, and he published a version of what they called the authorized version, what we call the King James Version, and he put in annotations in the footnotes describing the differences between the authorized version and these three ancient codices. His annotations included, beyond just saying whether it came from Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, or Alexandrinus, he also put a star if he thought the original reading of the manuscript was the best reading. So in these manuscripts, there would be areas where you could tell something was written and then they kind of wrote over it because they corrected it. Well, if he looked at what was underneath and thought, well, I think the underneath is better, then he would put a star next to it. If he thought that the revision was the better reading, he would put a 2 next to it. And you might say, oh my gosh, you're killing me. This is where it starts getting interesting, because now I'm going to give you 11 objective facts over the course of this presentation, which really can't be denied. So, objective fact number 1, the fact that Tischendorf had to give these annotations tells you that all 3 of these ancient codices, all 3 of them, had alterations. They were all revised. They all had places where they wrote one thing and and they came back and looked at it and go, no, let me put something else. So that is an objective fact. They're human. Maybe they wrote the wrong thing. Maybe. However, the scholars who look at it go, well, yeah, but some of those revisions are wrong. So all 3 of these codices have extensive revisions in them, and all 3 of them, the people who would claim to know the most about these texts say that some of these revisions are wrong. So I had my Tischendorf New Testament, and I had 30 some English translations of the Bible. Now, am I going to look at the entire New Testament doing this? No. But I did look at the entire book of Matthew. And I did that because it's a large sample size. So any conclusions you come from it at least have a chance to be applicable to the rest of the New Testament. Even if it wasn't applicable to the rest of the New Testament, it's certainly applicable to Matthew. So anything you say here about Matthew is still, you might say, well, the rest of the New Testament's fine, but Matthew's screwed up. No, no one's going to look at a translation of the New Testament and come to that conclusion. So anyway, these are the ones I looked at, and they include all the ones that are used in English churches, or English-speaking churches, as far as I know. The New American Standard Bible is used in evangelical churches. Some evangelical churches use the New International Version. A lot of them use the English Standard Version. A lot of the mainline churches use the the New Revised Standard Version. And the Catholic versions are here as well. So basically, all your American churches that aren't using King James, I mean, there's still some that use that. These are all represented here. So we can quantify whether or not those individual translations, those 30 translations I gave you, uses an alternate codex or the majority text. Because of the Tischendorf New Testament, now we can create a spreadsheet. That's what I did. Now, this does not explain all variations in the English translation. So I just wanted to give you one example of one that has nothing to do with it, and it has to do with proper nouns. So in the Geneva Bible, it says about Jesus that he would be called a Nazarite. In the King James, it says he shall be called a Nazarene. And in the New American Standard, it says he shall be called a Nazorian. Now, in the translation of Greek to English, when you're using proper names, especially when they're based on Aramaic or Hebrew names, there tends to be a lot of variability, and that's just the way it is. But I would point out to you that Nazarene means you're from Nazareth. Nazarite means that you are a special consecrated person for the work of God, as described in the law of the Nazarite in the Torah. And if you're a Nazorian, you are not from Nazareth, you're from Nazoria. What do you say, Holly? They're not the same words?
They're not.
They're not the same words. Okay. And it is possible that they could all three be right at the same time, but does it seem likely that they're all right at the same time, Holly?
Nope.
No, it's possible they're all wrong, but it's more, shall we say, plausible that one of them is right and one of them is not right. Mm-hmm. So, before I give you the actual data of the analysis, there are some caveats, right? There are subjectivity in evaluating the details. I categorize things as major, minor, and insignificant variants. Someone might disagree. Some translations use italics to indicate that the text was added by the editor. And so some of these variants that have deletions, the translation decided to put the deletion in as an italics. So they're kind of saying, well, I want to put it in my translation, but I don't really believe it's real. Well, I decided to count that as being included because the words are there. Okay, mistakes. Yeah, I could have made mistakes. Tischendorf could have made mistakes. BibleWorks could have made mistakes because I used BibleWorks 9 software. But, when you're looking at a large sample size, the issue of error on individual details becomes less of an issue. Some variants cannot be evaluated for every version. So when I tell you, this one has 200 variants in it, it's the caveat is there are some variants that I can't evaluate for each individual translation. Like this one translation of the Peshitta in BibleWorks, it was incomplete. So some of the verses are missing. Most translations in English are word for word, like the vast majority of them. But some of them are paraphrases. They're going thought by thought. And so some of the variants you can't evaluate just because of the nature of how they paraphrased it. And some variants have verb tense changes that aren't relevant in modern English. Like we don't say saith or said. We just say said in either place. Now, that's not an important variant, by the way. I would have put that under insignificant. So none of this is going to take away from the major variants that I'm going to show you. Okay, Matthew has 1,072 verses in 28 chapters. 609 of those verses have no variance between the majority text and the three major codices, but 463 do. And out of those 463 verses, there are 619 variations. So it's more than one per verse. Now, out of these 619 variations, 277 are word substitutions. So instead of one word, it's another. That can just be a spelling difference, which is generally, I would consider that insignificant. I already told you verb tense changes I don't get too excited about. That can change the meaning, but most of the time in a narrative, the verb tense change isn't as important. 279 are deletions. So, and this is a big chunk of it. It's like something in between a word or a phrase that's even bigger than an entire verse has been deleted. That's where you start getting to major differences. 90 are insertions, so they're putting something in. That is normally a major difference, but not always. There are word order changes, which can change the meaning, at least to an English speaker such as myself. But most word order changes actually don't matter to the meaning. And some of these variants contain more than one of these types. Like it'll have a deletion and a word order change, or something like that. That's why the numbers don't add up to 619. Now, each codex contains each of these subtypes of variants. So it's not like you just have deletions in one of them. No, there's deletions in all three. There are insertions in all three. So this leads us to objective fact number 2. There are a lot of variations just in that one book. It represents over 40% of the verses. Now, not all variants are created equal. I've already kind of, talked about that. They're different in quality. So in my opinion, we're getting a little subjective here, but 472 of them are completely insignificant. The meaning of the verse is not changed at all. 103 are minor, where the verse no longer says the exact same thing, but the meaning of the verse is not fundamentally different. 45 are major, where the verse's meaning is clearly different, or beyond the meaning different, some objective information has changed. So like you go from naming one person to naming another person. They're different people. It's objective information. It has changed. They're different in origin. So 684 variants are from Vaticanus, 506 are from Sinaiticus, 35 are from Alexandrius, and only 5 are found in all 3. Now, this tells you that Alexandrius is very, very close to the majority text. So that tells you something just looking at it, but again, there are differences. So this leads us to objective fact number 3 and number 4. Okay, major variants exist. I'm going to show you the ones that I classified as major. Okay, you may not agree that they're all major. Okay, you're definitely going to agree that some of them are. The 3 ancient codices do not fully agree with each other. In fact, they don't even close to agree with each other. They're not. They do overlap, but they don't agree with each other. So it's not like we have it would be easier to go to an older random codice that you found in the desert if it totally agreed with, something else, and you're like, hey, they're both really old and they totally agree. It'd be easier to go with it, but that's just not the case. So each English version has its own unique mix of incorporated variants. So you don't have to necessarily read all this. In fact, why would you read all this? But I'm going to point out a few things. In the beginning, You see like the RWB, Revised Webster, it has only 2 variants, and they're both insignificant. The original Websters, that have 3 variants, all of which were insignificant. You start moving to the newer things, though, and you start getting to big numbers. The NRSV, which is the mainline Protestant version, that has 266 variants just in Matthew, 20 of which are major. But it's not that different from the quote unquote evangelical versions. The ESV has more variants, 276, 21 of which are major. The New American Standard has 280, 18 of which are major. The NIV has 251, of which 21 are major. Now, they're not all the same ones, too. I'm going to show you this. Even though you go, well, these numbers are kind of close. Yeah, they are kind of close in aggregate, but the actual details of which one they chose to incorporate, they don't agree with each other. That's why the English versions are different. That's why they all have copyrights. And here you can see, this is the last piece of data I'm going to show you. I know this will kill you, and if I were better, I'd give you a more exciting PowerPoint presentation. But when you just look at whether they choose Vaticanus, whether they choose Sinaiticus, Alexandrius, or whether they choose the one that's like all 3, there is no 0%, there is no 100%, and these numbers are all different. Even when all 3 manuscripts agree, this is the wild thing. There's only 5 places where the majority text is different from all 3. None of the English versions incorporate all 5 of them. They all incorporate some of them. And as I said, some of them are, insignificant. But even so, it's not like it's older is better. That is clearly not the case. In general, they're choosing about half. Okay. This leads us to 4 important objective facts. Number 1, no 2 English translations are alike. No 2. None. The closest thing you get to is Webster and Revised Webster. They really are like 99.9999% alike. No English translation exclusively uses one ancient codex. Well, that tells you something. That tells you that no ancient codex is considered perfect by any of the translators of modern English versions. They don't look to one. Nobody does that. The Revised Webster, though, has the least number of variants. And because both are insignificant, I think it has nothing to do with the source text. I don't think they were, I just think it was a random insignificant difference that happened to overlap with what was found in Tischendorf. So I actually believe that the people who did Revised Webster, they were truly trying to follow the majority text. The New King James is really close. It's the only other modern English translation without a single major variant. It had what I considered 1 minor variant and 21 insignificant variants. So it's, again, I think overall they were trying to follow the majority text. But they were the only 2 that really were trying out of the modern ones. Everyone else was freely incorporating these other 3 ancient codices. So we're going to go through the different types of differences, and we're not going to necessarily bloviate on all of them, but we're going to go from small to big. So we're starting with the small deletions.
And knew her not till she had brought forth her firstborn son, and he called his name Jesus.
Okay, so Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, they both have had brought forth a son, meaning that they deleted firstborn. So if you look, most of your English translations are like, yeah, let's get rid of firstborn here. We believe it. Now, does that mean something? Well, when if Jesus was Mary's firstborn son, Holly, would that imply that Mary had more children?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you take away firstborn, would that imply that maybe you don't want to say Mary had more children?
Could be.
Possibly. Well, let's just say there's a big chunk of Christianity out there that, they sincerely believe that Mary was a perpetual virgin. Ergo, she would not have had a firstborn son. She just would have had a son.
And Jesus, when he was baptized, went up straightway out of the water, and lo, the heavens were open unto him. And he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting upon him.
Okay. So you might say, hey, Heath, this isn't such a big deal. Well, okay, we're going to talk about it anyway. When Jesus was baptized, did the heavens open, or did they open to him? Now, you might say, well, that probably means the same thing. It could, but you could also say that it doesn't mean the same thing, that he just had a vision of the heavens open. Right, Holly?
Yep.
You with me on that?
I am.
Okay, you would call that a difference?
Yes.
All right. So, again, now we look at our list here. The list is totally different, right? Yet it's still the same to Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. So, like the ESV, I don't want to pick on it, but I'll pick on it just for a second. They said, yeah, we'll get rid of firstborn, but we'll keep to him, as an example. More small deletions. Now, this is kind of important.
But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment.
Okay. Sinaiticus and Vaticanus admit without a cause. So they're just saying that whosoever is angry with his brother shall be in danger of the judgment. Now, Holly, is that kind of important to the meaning?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So we're looking at this list here, and you're like, oh, well, ESV, NIV, NRS. They're like, yeah, just don't get, we believe that Jesus said, just don't get angry. Okay, well, that's cool. Here's one.
Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. Freely ye have received, freely give.
Okay, this is Jesus talking to his disciples. So he tells them, hey, go out there and help people, right? Well, Sinaiticus says it deleted raise the dead, which is like, it's wild, right? Nobody except for MGI incorporated that. So everyone's like, no, we're keeping raise the dead. They all want to keep that. Okay.
Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother.
Okay, here we go. Again, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. You'll see that there's a trend that they do tend to have deletions together. Not all the time, believe me, not all the time, but they do often. And here only 5 of the versions said, yeah, we're going to keep that. Again, so if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him. Okay. That's what, the majority text says. But the version that, New American Standard likes, they're like, no. Listen, if your brother just sins, you just go and tell him. Not just if he sins against you. Now, do they have different meanings, Holly?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a chance that there's some people that really want to go out and just tell their brother, hey man, you kicked a little duck in the pond. You need to confess, brother.
Yep.
Yeah, because they're looking at their brother, looking for problems, and whereas other people are like, maybe just Jesus, what he really meant was, just if he sins against you, hey man, quit stealing the water from my irrigation ditch, right? Dude, why are you doing that? All right.
But all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments.
Now, does this totally change the verse? No. To delete of their garments. But it also is like, well, what the heck does it mean? They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders. The borders of what? Their phylacteries, I guess. I'm just saying it's a less clear statement, right? And again, like you got some random ones here, like but most English translations, they didn't keep it. They're like, no, we're going to keep of their garments. But, a minority said, yeah, let's get rid of that.
Behold, your house is left unto you desolate.
Okay, Vaticanus got rid of desolate. So it says, listen, your house is left to you. That doesn't mean the same thing. And so the English translations are like, yeah, we're not going to keep that. We're going to keep like a bunch of other Vaticanus deletions, but we'll leave that one alone.
For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famine and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places.
Okay, so both of them get rid of pestilences. It's just they switch the words around. Either earthquakes first or famines first. So a bunch of the versions got rid of it. Not all of them, but they're like, so you can feel better. So as the end of the world comes, there will be famines and earthquakes, but don't worry about the pestilences. They have been deleted. So don't worry about the coronavirus because it's been deleted. Okay, go ahead.
And consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him.
Okay. Vatican is like, no, we're getting rid of the kill part, which is kind of what happened. But, that's okay because that's just one sentence. But all the versions are like, no, we're going to keep the killing. Okay.
For this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins.
Yeah, a lot of Christians, they I use the word New Testament, New Covenant. Here, most of the versions here, though, they got rid of new. So it's just the blood of the covenant or the testament. Do you think that changes the meaning a little bit, Holly?
Slightly.
Yeah, I mean, it does. And so you're looking at all the English versions, and you're like, yeah, NIV, they got rid of new. NRS, yeah, got rid of new. NIV, ESV, New American Standard, yep, they got rid of new. It's just the blood of the covenant. Okay. Thanks, guys. All right, so that was what I'm going to call like just small deletions. How about single word substitution?
Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven.
So Vaticanus has your good things, which, does change. I mean, things and works, are they the same thing, Holly?
No.
Things are things, right? And works are like actions?
Yep, it is.
All right. So, again, our English translations are like, yeah, I don't like that.
Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake.
So this isn't a huge difference, but is there a difference between just being hated by the nations and hated by all nations?
Yep.
Yeah, especially when you think that the word nations is commonly translated as Gentiles. So you shall be hated of all Gentiles for my name's sake versus you shall be hated of the Gentiles. And you might say, Heath, that's not a big deal. Okay, I'm with you. None of the English translations wanted it anyway. So they all wanted to keep all.
And they stripped him and put on him a scarlet robe.
Yeah, so Sinaiticus and Vaticanus said, well, they clothed him and put on him a scarlet robe, which is clothing someone and stripping someone the same thing, Holly?
No, they're different.
You would generally consider them to be opposites,
Yes.
right? Okay. Like, just basically none of the English translations wanted that too. Okay, names. Now, I'm just going to fly through this. But, just deleting someone's name, who's Thaddeus. Okay.
Poor Thaddeus.
Yeah, Thaddeus is just, he got cut. He got canceled.
Yes, he did.
Thaddeus got canceled.
Yep. So did
John,
Joseph.
John versus Joseph. Those aren't the same names. They're just different names. Now, is this going to change your theology? No. But are they the same name? No. But no one took that substitution though. No one took the deletion of Barachias. So Barachias has not been canceled. He's still around. These are the ladies that went to Jesus' tomb. So, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. Okay. Sinaiticus says, it says Mary, the sons of Zebedee. Okay. Mary of Joseph, and Mary, the mother of James. So they split out the Mary, like the Mary that we think is the mother of James and Joseph. They actually split them out to like two people. And Mary Magdalene kind of, I don't know if she got canceled or if she just got reincorporated and she's now someone's mom. Anyway, none of the English translations decided to go with it, but Sinaiticus said, hey, this is the real deal. Okay. I love this one.
That it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables.
Okay. So Sinaiticus is that they're helpful. They're telling you, hey, man, this is Isaiah. The Greek version of Isaiah is Isaias. Isaias the prophet instead of the prophet. The problem is the quotes from Psalms. So I'm just sorry. And so the English translations are like, yeah, I don't know, we're probably going to leave that alone. Here's another insertion.
But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only.
Okay, here we go. So Sinaiticus and Vaticanus insert nor the Son. So it's not the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but my Father only. That's, I would say that's an important insertion. You with me, Holly?
I am.
Okay. Most of the English translations are like, sign us up, we're taking it.
Neither be ye called masters, for one is your master, even Christ.
Okay. So is it the same thing to say, for one is your master, or because your master is one?
Nope.
No, because your master is one kind of implies that they're saying some kind of like deity, right, to the master. God is one, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So here, word order does kind of mean something, but the English translations didn't like it, so it didn't make it. Here's another insertion. This is a big insertion. I like this one. Go ahead, Holly. Oh, she left. Okay. It says, the rest said, let be, let us see whether Elias will come to save him. This is where Jesus is on the cross. Well, SV, after to save him, adds, but another took a spear and pierced his side, and there came out water and blood. That's like a big insertion, right? They're saying like Jesus got speared and water and blood came out of his side. That is inserted by both Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. And yet none of the New English translations like that. They're like, we don't want to insert that piece of information. Here's something, multi-word substitutions. We're getting more complex. And believe me, if I'm killing you, I'm sorry. Just, fast forward to the end. But it says here, and then shall many be offended and shall betray one another and shall hate one another. Well, Sinaiticus says, and shall deliver up one another, which is close to betraying, they shall deliver up one another to tribulation. So they're just basically, is it totally changing the word? No, but is it changing? It's not changing it theologically, but it is inserting a word, tribulation, which was not at all in the sentence in the first place. Well, at least according to the majority text. And none of the English translations liked that, so they got rid of it. Here's another one. And the king shall answer and say to them, Verily I say to you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it to me. Well, Vaticanus says, inasmuch as you have done it unto one of these least, you have done it unto me. So he got rid of the brethren part, kind of changed the order of the word around a little bit. Is that a huge deal? No. Again, though, it's found in Vaticanus, and none of the English translations wanted it. This is more complicated, and you can see almost all the modern English translations took it. So the King James says, And behold, one came and said unto him, Good master, what good thing shall I do, that I may have eternal life? And he said to him, Why call thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God. But if you will enter into life, keep the commandments. Well, S and V, and therefore the English ones, they decided to say, and behold, one came and said to him, Master, what thing, it's Master, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? So they got rid of good master and just made him master. And so then Jesus' reply, Why ask thou me concerning what is good? And who is good? He who is good is one. So the guy's not calling Jesus good anymore. So of course Jesus isn't going to reply, why do you call me good? Instead he says, what good thing shall I do? And so his reply is, why do you ask me concerning what is good? Now you might say, well, okay, it is different, I acknowledge, but it's not changing theology or whatever, right? Okay, I'm with you. I'm not saying any of this is changing theology, but it is kind of confusing. Okay, now we're getting to larger deletions, and these are actually important. So I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, that means divorce, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, commits adultery. And whoso marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery. So Vaticanus says, instead of and shall marry another commits adultery, he says, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, causes her to commit adultery. So he's just getting rid of the whole part about marrying another, which is the only thing that would make that make sense. Same verse, Sinaiticus changes things, but in a completely different way. They just have this big deletion where the whole end part of the verse is gone. So Jesus just says, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, commits adultery, period. And about half the English translations do that, including like ESV and NIV and NASB, the popular evangelical ones, they're all doing it. But, that's kind of an important addition, right? Because he's saying that if you divorce your wife and marry another, you're committing adultery. And if you divorce your wife and she marries someone else, that person's committing adultery too. They're just getting rid of half of that. Okay, more large deletions. This is a big one. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Well, big chunk of the English translations agree we should delete bless them that curse you and do good to them that hate you. Here's the Lord's Prayer, so-called. This is why the Lord's Prayer has changed. Because most of the English, I shouldn't even say most, half of the English translations cut off the end of it. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Deleted. Canceled. Out. They say unto him, because no man hath hired us, he saith unto them, go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. Well, most of the English translations just have Jesus say, just go into the vineyard. So the last shall be first, and the first last. For many are called, but few chosen. Many are called, but few chosen has been deleted by most English translations. Jesus answered and said, this is to James and John, you know not what you ask. Are you able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of, and to be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They say unto him, we're able. Well, that whole phrase, the phrase about being baptized has been completely deleted based on Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, by half of the English translations. And then the next verse, same thing. They delete that too. And it's the same group, at least they're internally consistent on that point. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. All three, S, V, and A, omit wherein the Son of Man cometh. So it just has Jesus say, watch, because you don't know the day or the hour. And most of the English translations are okay with that. During Jesus' trial, the high priest arose and said to him, answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witnesses against thee? Well, they don't have him say that in Sinaiticus, but the English translations did not like that deletion, so they did not incorporate it. Here's another one. Again, the same priest. But Jesus held his peace, and the high priest answered and said to him. So in Sinaiticus, he wasn't silent when facing his accusers. That was just deleted. But it did not make its way into the English translations. And they crucified Jesus and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. All three of the codices omit that whole last part. And most English translations, but certainly not, it's not like an overwhelming majority take it. Now, this is one place where it's a difference between the Textus Receptus, which again was written by Erasmus and was used as one of the primary sources for the King James Version. That was not actually in the majority text. At least we don't believe it is. So the versions that choose this deletion, I wouldn't say that they're against the majority text. This is the only example like that, by the way, in the entire book of Matthew. Okay, now we're just talking about omitting the whole verse. So ESV got rid of Matthew 12:47. It's not in that Bible. Matthew 17:21. Well, you got more of them got rid of that one. Matthew 18:11, omitted by a chunk. Matthew 23:14, again, similar group. But you can see these lists are all different. More verses. Matthew 24:35. It's a little ironic, isn't it? Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. That verse has been deleted by Sinaiticus, but it was retained by all the English translations. Okay, this is even more than a verse. Matthew 16:2-3, basically everything Jesus says is eliminated by Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, yet None of the English translations basically incorporated that. None of them. So you can see they don't consistently take the deletions. Now, there are very famous deletions that are found in Mark and John, which I'm not going to talk about here because this is only about Matthew, but I only bring that up to say that this is a long deletion, but there are even longer deletions, like the whole end of the book of Mark, for example, or the whole section about Jesus forgiving the adulterous woman and saying, very famously, he without sin cast the first stone. That's a big chunk that's been deleted. It's not in Matthew, so it's not in this evaluation. So if you're still with me and you've listened to all of these changes, we have some more objective facts. Even if you disagree with some of these as being major, you have to say some of them are major. None of the differences, though, are so radical that they introduce major theological differences. So nowhere are we hearing like, thou shalt worship Satan. Jesus is not God. Jesus did not exist. You're not hearing stuff like that. But there's still major differences. Here's another one. Now that you've actually seen it, the pattern of which differences are incorporated by each of the different versions, it's not like there's a clear pattern, which leads to, this is the first opinion I'm giving you today. The vast majority of modern translations pick and choose based on subjective editorial criteria. Now, you might think, well, it sounds evil. Well, I know what it's like to be on an expert panel and to have people have a real debate over ambiguous data. And so I don't actually believe that it is evil, but it is fair to say that it's subjective. So, what do we learn from this? If the majority text is the inspired text, so if it's the one that we've, basically has been created over time and represents the vast majority of the known manuscripts, then most modern translations I analyzed should be read with some caution because they have variations that range from insignificant to major in the book of Matthew. So even if somehow these issues didn't exist in any other book, which I don't believe, by the way, that's just not the truth. I just didn't, create statistics for these other books. If the majority text is inspired, that means that pretty much every modern English translation, including the one that is probably being read in your church, they've deviated from the inspired text, if the majority text is actually inspired. If the majority text is inspired, then the most faithful is actually the Revised Webster's Update, which I've never even heard any church ever using ever. Never heard it. I have heard the New King James Version used in a minority, and I would say that, well, at least based on the book of Matthew, actually, it's not bad. It's way better than everything else if the majority text is inspired. Now, if the majority text is not inspired, then that means that all of this is close enough, because if the majority text is not inspired, then these other versions, no one believes that they're inspired either, which means that there is no inspired text that has been preserved for us today, if that's your conclusion. And that it's just up to people with textual criticism to try to find the closest thing we can to what was the original intent of the authors, which to, a scholar is whoever wrote it, and to a Christian would be, God's inspiration. So if the inspired text has not been preserved, then these are all kind of close enough. They're all kind of roughly equivalent from a theological point of view, and they can be chosen based on your personal taste, your convenience, or any other subjective criteria. And that probably suits non-fundamentalists fine. People that don't believe in inerrancy, dude, they're fine with that. They're like, hey, it's close enough. But it is not a comfortable proposition for most fundamentalist Christians to adopt. Yet they're reading Bibles that is their inherent worldview. One more opinion from me. The process of the creation of the majority text. See, I don't know, the process, because, it's lost to history, right? I mean, how did they end up taking the different textual variants that existed in their time and come to a conclusion of what is correct and then propagate that in as faithful manner as possible? Well, I will say that I believe that process is more trustworthy than today's process. And that's because it was closer to the source and it was directed by Christians. I mean, today, yeah, there are Christians, but there's also, your average biblical scholar is not a Christian. And I'm not judging anyone, but they'll tell you that, they're not. So back then, and someone would say, well, this is biased, then it's biased. Yeah, you're right, it's biased. But, not all bias is bad. So that process was directed by Christians that felt a burden to propagate the truth. They didn't want to change it. They didn't want to alter it. They wanted to propagate the truth. That was their motivation. I do believe studying variants is interesting. When you look at OneGospel, if you actually look at the text and don't just listen to my words, sometimes my words I'll bring up variants, but you can see I looked at every single variant, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, every single one. I think it's interesting. But the source of those variants, those codices, I don't find them inspiring because of the various things I've shared with you today. So, question for you, and really, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm just telling you what I think is true. Most of what I told you is just fact. I did give you a couple opinions, but ultimately we all have to come to the conclusion, how inspiring is the Bible you're reading? So, as we continue in our OneGospel journey, we're going to keep at it. We're not going to avoid the controversial. We're not going to beat up on anyone. We're just going to accept things for what they are, and we're going to try to learn from them. So hopefully you can do the same. Hopefully we can all do the same together.